Well, we've certainly talked about our feelings after the Predators were swept in the first round by the Colorado Avalanche. On today's Locked On Predators, we're going to talk numbers. I'm joined by our good friend Bryan Bastin, who breaks down the stats and the dollars you need to know going into the offseason.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day. I am Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at ontheforecheck.com, and I am usually joined by my partner in crime, Nick Morgan. Nick is on a much-deserved vacation this week, so today I am joined by our good friend, Bryan Bastin, who is a coworker at ontheforecheck.com. Bryan is a stats man. He knows the numbers, and he knows how to break them down. So on today's episode, we talk about the stats that tell the story of this past season, and we look at some dollar signs that may make a difference in next season. I'm joined right now by my very good friend and yours, Bryan Bastin. Bryan is a writer and editor at ontheforecheck.com, works with Nick and I. He also is a part of the Renegades of Puck. If you are not following Renegades of Puck and checking them out, you absolutely must do that too. Bryan is here to talk all of the numbers. Bryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you once again for having me. I had a blast last time, so was really excited to come back.
We always find a way to make this fun for sure. Okay, so I'm going to start out. One of the things that Nick and I do in the podcast is after a game, we always come up with our one word to describe the game. I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask you for your one word to describe the Predators season.
Okay, I see. Everything I've been thinking of is two words, but I'm going to try to get this down.
Okay, there are no rules. You can have two words.
All right, met expectations. I would say met expectations, just because I luckily I do have I'm on record of saying this before the season that if the Predators, after everything that happened at the end of last offseason, all the changes that happened, losing franchise guys like Arvidsson, Ryan Ellis, guys like that, this team was not really built to be a Stanley Cup contender. And as we saw throughout the season, they really weren't. But, I did say that they should be happy if they can get to the first round of the playoffs, because this was not a playoff team. And I don't really think that, they talk about how they were underdogs and nobody picked them to finish, into the playoffs. I mean, nobody did. We didn't really.
No.
And they did that. And obviously people are very, very, very tired of how these seasons keep ending. But this was exactly what we probably should have expected. And that makes it harder to figure out where to go next. So.
Well, and it's been kind of a hard season to nail down, like, emotionally, because like you said, there were certain expectations laid out. I think we all kind of felt like, we talk about those cursed words, competitive rebuild, so expectations were set. And then all of a sudden, December, January, we're like, now check this team out. All of a sudden they might be more than we thought. And then kind of the wheels sort of fell off at the end, and certainly fell off in the playoffs, in the sweep. So it's been an emotional roller coaster in a lot of ways, I think, for Nashville Predators fans. And even now, I'm still trying to figure out, where do we land on this season? It was a tricky one. This was a tricky one.
Yeah, I mean, I understand completely the frustration of a lot of people. I mean, I felt it quite a bit throughout the season. But I will say, like, I think May said the same thing on TV. Like, this has been one of the most fun seasons that I've watched, just because it was pure chaos a lot of the time. And we got to see... the Predators took however many years to finally have a 40-goal scorer, and they get 2, which is awesome.
Yep.
That Forsberg and the other guy. Who's that other guy again? I'm not sure if he's
is
he a household name in your house yet? Because he should be.
Matt Duchene, baby.
Yeah, that's right. But
my husband cringes and cowers at the sound of that name.
I think he did it just to spite him. But, we got to see a lot of cool stuff. We saw Tanner Jeannot have a great season. We saw, Ryan Johansson appear to look, back in form, not quite where, people would want him. We saw Duchene bounce back from an awful season. We got to see the Phil that we all hoped we would see. There was a lot of cool stuff. We got to see how good UC Saros was. But there was just, it didn't seem sustainable. And,
Yeah.
Filip Forsberg shooting 18% throughout the season, not sustainable. And we saw that in
Yeah.
the playoffs, and so
Yeah.
it's just one of those that it was a good style. It was a fun style. It was, if you were one of those people that loves physical, tough hockey and slowing it down, 2-3 goal games, this was your team.
Yeah.
But it was interesting just because I think Nashville only lost one game in, I believe, 32, which if they had a lead in the second period going into the third period, I mean,
Gosh.
they held on to it. Like, they only lost one time. But on the other hand, they were 3-20 when they entered the third, when they were entered the third trailing. And that kind of speaks to the style of this team. They used that physicality to slow the game down, and they were getting offense to where they could slow the game down. They could count on their guys to score 2 or 3, maybe 4 goals. And when that dried up, yeah, they stayed physical. Yeah, the defense tried to do their best to slow things down. But when you have, UC Saros out and you don't have anybody providing any goal support for, Riddick, Ingram, whatever, even Saros, I'm not sure it would have been enough, against Colorado. They may have stolen a game or two, but the team offensively just kind of shut down. So.
Yeah, it was kind of, I always say this season felt like it ended with a whimper, and it was unexpected because of the way the middle of the season was. So,
right.
And like you said, there were some really great numbers this season. Duchesne, Forsberg, Roman Josi, 98 points. Mikhail Granlund had a high in assists, had a career high in assists. So there were some great numbers this season. But there were some numbers that caused the Predators some trouble. And you talked a little bit about leads going into the third period and being in a deficit. And that was really, I don't know. It makes me wonder if the style of hockey is not sustainable long term. Like, how much of the kind of limp to the finish, do you feel like any of that is chalked up to style of hockey wearing people down? Or do you just think that's a more of an emotional component of where the Predators are?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a few things. One of the things when Hines was hired, I talked to CJ Totoro from at the time he was at the New Jersey SB Nation affiliate, and he had said one of their things was that he was going. Hines always had a emphasis on quality shot taking, and we saw a little bit of that, in his first couple of abbreviated years. But this season they were 28th in the NHL in shot quality, which is fine. Because really, we did see them take good shots, but their whole offense was built off of the strategy is they were going to be physical, they were going to be hard, and instead of using their transition players to get things, like being a rush team, which they absolutely were not this season. They were a hard forechecking team, and we saw, the herd line, and we saw guys like Filip Forsberg being physical in the opposite end, getting turnovers, and they scored a ton of goals just off of turnovers, playing hard on the forecheck, which is, great in itself, but you have to have a constant stream of offense. You can't, your top two lines have to be players that can score for you, that can set up other players, that aren't Nuke Cunnin, things like that, and I really do think that the style of this team could have worked. I think they got that part down to a science, really. I mean, there were signs of that against the Avalanche, but the rest of the team wasn't built to be an offensive team like that outside of Forsberg and Duchesne and maybe Josi, just because that's, you've got a lot of young players. You've got a lot of guys. You're not going to have a Nick Cousins scoring outburst. You're not going to, how much do we rely on a Philip Tomasino or an Eeli Tolvanen? It's interesting, but the team just really wasn't built. But again, they were in a hard position because at the deadline, would you want to, mortgage your future to get a guy to push you over the top? Do you want to sit and do nothing? They chose the second, and so there's a lot of what ifs. But there's some brightness to the future that they didn't overspend at the deadline. So
yeah, would you have wanted them to make some bigger moves at the deadline? Where do you land on that?
I think maybe not throwing away a second round pick would have been great. My heart won't let me say that they should have moved Filip Forsberg yet, just because it's tough and it makes me cry. But I mean, there were things I think that they could have done to maybe set themselves up for this next season. And they've got a lot of free agents coming up. They've got the biggest free agent with Filip Forsberg, and they've got cap space, and so it'll be interesting to see what they do. But it's going to be real interesting to see if David Poile is going to be the guy pulling the trigger on this one more time, or if it's going to be somebody else.
Yeah. Where do you land on that? Do you think we're going to see Poile next year in the front office?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
just because
I
I
do
don't
too.
think that they'll want to. And honestly, if they don't, will it be, somebody in the family that takes over?
Mm-hmm.
Probably. So I don't know. I think it'll take a year, like a bad year, maybe next season for really everything to get over. But I can't imagine the ownership group is that happy with things.
Yeah. It was, and again, you go back to this whole season is all about expectations, the expectation, competitive rebuild, that sets a certain expectation. And then all of a sudden in December and January, this is a team that's producing, this is a team that's competing. And then that just sort of vanished. There was something that happened at the All-Star break, and I don't know what sort of hockey voodoo occurred then, but that was just sort of the Predators peaked too early. So much of hockey, I think, is timing. And, they just didn't time it well. So give me a bad stat. We talked about the good stats. We have, Duchesne, Forsberg, Yossi, Granlund. We have all these great stats. Give me a bad stat from this season. Let's break it down.
Gosh, there's plenty. I did talk about the shot quality already. I've said if you've followed me in any form or fashion online, you know how I feel about the amount of penalties that they took. Just utterly ridiculous. And again, the PK wasn't bad, about middle of the pack. The power play, luckily, they still finished, I think, 9th for the regular season in the NHL, but it was a franchise best at 24%. So, it didn't seem like it. I really, if you'd asked me to guess their power play percentage this season, I would have said somewhere around 13, 14. But they did that, but they gave up more time. Even if the penalty kill was, let's say the penalty kill was at 90%, just something unreal.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
The amount of times that they were in the penalty box. I mean, it's not only that you're going to be shorthanded and you're going to have the team, the opponent have chances to score. It's you're taking away 5-on-5 time. This is a team that had, I think, one shorthanded goal this season, and it took until pretty far into the season for that to happen. They weren't an aggressive power killing team. And, again, they were spending, I think they averaged per 60 minutes. They averaged just over 10 minutes for every 60 minutes they played shorthanded. And you can't do that. You just really can't, because again, you're not just, putting your defense in a bind, putting UC Saros in a bind, but you're taking your best players off the ice. Roman Josi didn't play on the penalty kill this season, which was probably a decent, decision, but you're taking your best player off the ice for those moments. And when you're doing it 4 to 5 times a game, you're putting yourself in a position to lose.
Yep. This is a rough stat. Now, one thing that I always say, there are no snacks in the sin bin. This, I wish that one of these days they would learn this. Coming up, we're going to talk some other numbers that the Nashville Predators are going to be wrestling with when it comes to things like free agency. But speaking of snack, Bryan, let me tell you a little something about our friends at Built Bar. They have this new product out. I just received mine the end of last week. They are called birthday cake puffs, and they are as amazing as they sound. I'd never had anything like this before. I've had several since I received them.
Right.
So they are this Built Bar puff, which is a protein infused marshmallow. It is covered in white chocolate with sprinkles, and it literally tastes like you are eating birthday cake. It is incredible. And anybody can get these. You can find them at built.com. It's a new flavor. If you haven't tried puffs, they also have lots of other Built Bar flavors. I'm a huge, we are big Built Bar folks here. I love the double chocolate. I love the cherry barcia is my favorite. You can have Built Bar puffs. You can have any of the regular Built Bars, and you are making a healthy choice that tastes great. Everything's covered in 100% real chocolate, so you feel like you are giving yourself a little treat, but actually you are making a healthy choice. They have 150 calories, 16 grams of protein, only 9 grams of sugar.
Wow.
And that is a steal when you're looking for something to grab and go this summer. All Built Bar puffs, again, covered in 100% real chocolate. You can eat healthy. You can enjoy doing it. You can go to built.com right now. You've got to try these birthday cake puffs, everyone. Built.com. Use our promo code LOCKED15. You can get 15% off your order. That is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Okay, so we've got lots of other numbers coming up for the Nashville Predators that we're going to have to discuss. And I think the big dollar sign number that we're going to be talking about is, of course, Filip Forsberg. This is a tough one. Again, you go back and you mentioned this earlier. They didn't trade Forsberg at the trade deadline. We are still sort of hovering in that. How bad of a move was that?
Right.
What's going to happen? Talk to me about where you think market value numbers are for Filip Forsberg right now.
Yeah, I remember during, I think, preseason when all this talk started up, I think they had talked about pointing at Gabe Landeskog's contract as far as that being a benchmark, which let me pull that up because I want to make sure I get this right. But they talked about his contract and that being kind of a benchmark for it. And I think he had a 7. Yeah, he had a 7x8. And that, obviously we know that the Predators probably don't want to give out 8. They probably don't want to give out no trade clause. I think the first time that Poyle's given out one has been Roman Josi. But at the same time, you have to sit there and think, Filip Forsberg had a career season. It was highlighted by exceptionally high shooting percentage, which is not just luck. There is a little bit of luck involved, but obviously his finishing skill was much, much better. But we've also got a guy who's 27 years old, who's been making $6 million for a while. I mean, which is, that was a number about what Ellis got on his new contract. And you can't, they're not going to be able to get him for $6 million. So the question I think is if they're willing to give him 8.5 for a shorter term, and if he accepts that, I think that's good for both teams. Because again, a 4-year deal, he'll be 31. Give him 7 years, he'll be 34, which for the NHL is old. For us,
I was just going to say,
still a spring chicken, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, be very careful what you say after 34 years old.
Yeah, I bet you. But imagine how good that mustache will look in 4 or 5 years, right?
Okay, that one I cannot argue with you about. Absolutely.
A little gray in that, get a little silver fox action.
He's going to rock that. He is going to age very well. Filip Forsberg is going to age very well.
Yes, he will.
We just got to
hope it's aging 34. Here. Yeah, that's right.
Well, and where do you land on that? I mean, what is your gut telling you about Filip Forsberg and the Nashville Predators? And I know this is a tough. I mean, this is just a tough call.
I mean, honestly, I think if you take what Forsberg has said about, he wants to stay here. I want to say that they get something done, and they get something done that is reasonable. They're in a decent spot. Yes, they've got these contracts now. They're getting Duchesne and Johansson are over $8 million a piece. Forsberg was making 6, Roman making a little over 9 million. But I mean, other than that, David Riddick, he'll be a free agent, so he'll be out. Saros is only making 5 million. And of course, they've got $2 million in dead cap space with Kyle Turris, rest in peace. But
I love Kyle Turris. But that's $2 million.
Yes,
love Kyle Turris.
But looking at what free agency, so if you take all the possible free agencies off the free agents off the board for next season, they're sitting at about almost $26 million in cap space. So I don't think it's a bad idea that they would give Forsberg a big deal. If there's a compromise on either the total cost or the term. But I think David Poyle knows that if he does not get Filip Forsberg re-signed, that might be it for him, And so I think for better or for worse, I'm going to lean towards him coming back. How will it affect the team? I don't know, but with their composition, what they do. But I think if they do, whether or not they sign him or not, I think it's still pointing towards they've got to do something a little bit different. They need to start bringing up younger talent. I wouldn't be surprised if they sign Forsberg and then find a way to get rid of, a guy like Ryan Johansson, unfortunately, just because that's money they can get rid of. They were very lucky, not for Ryan, but, with the Ellis trade, that he didn't play. It wasn't that bad. How many times did you hear Preds fans talk about Victor Arvidsson not being here? Not a ton. He was hurt, but I mean, we heard a whole lot more about Ryan Hartman and Freddie Gaudreau and Kevin Fiala. Most of that was me. But again, I
don't blame you.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I still don't blame. I still like the trade for Fiala for Granlund. Yeah, he's not. Granlund's not giving you 30 goals or 30 plus goals like Fiala did this season, but he hit his cap here, and so I think it was best for both teams. I think Granlund fits the Predators and what they do perfectly. So I think he gets done. I think he gets done though, and I think Forsberg's back.
I hope so. It seems like it really wants to be here. I think it's very obvious that the team had something special this year.
Hmm.
I think they want to keep that together, even if they're going to add, some younger pieces, bring up some guys, maybe switch a few things around. But I think that core really wants to stay together. And when it comes to something like Fiala and Granlund, I always go back to, you look at this season, and I'm a huge Mikael Granlund fan,
Hmm.
but I feel like you have to credit him with some of the success that Duchesne and Forsberg had, because
Oh, 100%.
those three have such a like a symbiotic relationship, to
Hmm.
quote one of the Star Wars movies. But they have this symbiotic relationship where they really make each other better. And just I'm here for the Granlund thing, and I'll say my piece. I would like to see Forsberg come back. I will tell you, I wake up every day and there's a part of me that's like, please let this be the day. Let
Yeah.
this be the day they announce something.
Yeah.
We'll see. It would be hard, I think, to see Ryan Johansson go, but I agree with you. I think if they're going to clear some space, it's probably going to be Joey.
Hmm.
And he had a season where I think they could move him better than they could,
Right.
previously. So that makes a difference. Let's talk about a couple other UFAs.
Yeah.
And, one I would love to get your viewpoint on Nick Cousins. What you gonna do with Nick Cousins?
I mean, so his current deal is at 1.5 million. He's 28 years old, so I don't see them offering him more than 2 or 3 years, maybe 4. But I mean, they used him as a Colton Sissons type. He was
Hmm.
pretty effective at what he did. He wasn't that great on offense, but he was great on
Yeah.
that forecheck. And I think he's a Heinz guy for better or worse. And again, I was pleasantly surprised by his play this season. I don't think that he will, whatever they sign him for, I don't think he's going to command over 2.5 million. And I think that's acceptable to
Yeah.
me. So I think he
Yeah.
comes back.
Who do you see going? One way
Um,
or the other. Let's talk. I mean, one way or the other, whether, unrestricted free agent, who do you see going? And do you see them bringing up some more Milwaukee? How much of a rebuild are we going to see?
Well, I think, they've got a lot of free agents coming up, but we've talked about Forsberg and we talked about
Yeah.
Cousins. We
Yeah.
got the guys like Matt Benning and Ben Harper. I don't think Ben Harper comes back. Matt Benning,
Bless.
possibly, but he'll be veteran minimum. He was
Hmm.
making just $1 million this season, and it wasn't a bad deal for, what he
Yeah.
was. He wasn't great, but he was a third pairing defensemen rarely are. But it'll be very interesting to see, some guys that they have either, there's Yakov Trenin. And we all know how we all feel about Yakov Trenin, but he's
Yes.
arbitration eligible. I think he's made a solid case, being like one of the only goal scorers in the entire playoffs. He's going to make a little bit more than $725,000 next year, and I'm pretty
Yeah.
certain it's going to be in gold. The other interesting arbitration case, though, is our old friend Luke Cunnin, who is a restricted free
Okay.
agent, and I guarantee you they'll go to arbitration because I don't see the Predators offering him more than he was making what 2.3 million. I don't see them offering him that again. They seem to love him, the only 86 game starter on the entire team this year. But I think they're going to offer him something, and if he takes it to arbitration, this is one of those cases where I don't know that the player is going to win if they go to arbitration, and that
Yeah.
number may go down. So they may give him the qualifying offer. I'd have to look and see what the qualifying offer for him would be, but I just don't know that if they really feel that he's this integral piece and they want to continue developing him just because he was part of a trade, maybe, but I just don't see.
Hmm. You can say it.
I don't see reason why. I really don't.
Yeah.
You look at a guy like Cody Glass in the AHL, and yeah,
Yes.
he's had some starts. He's taking some time. He's a great player. He's younger. He's got some bumps, but what is it that Luke Cunnin did that Cody Glass couldn't do, that Philip Tomasino couldn't do, even Ellie Tolvanen, that really
Hmm.
couldn't do? He was a hard hitter. He was physical. He was pretty good at separating players from the puck. But I mean, he was, you look at advanced stat like goals above replacement. He was last
Hmm.
on the team. Last.
Really?
He was worse than Ben Harper. He was worse than Jeremy Lazon. He was worse than Benning and Borowiecki. I mean, and you can't, depending on how much stock you want to put in those type of stats, I mean, that's one thing, but the eye test. I mean, it's not like this was a thing where the people on Twitter are like, you don't watch the games, he's playing a great style. I mean, I think it was a pretty universal opinion about his play. And so I don't know. I think maybe they played him as much as they did this season as an extended audition to come back.
Mm-hmm.
I think they do, they'll give him the qualifying offer just because they kind of have to save face. But if he's coming back, it's going to be for much cheaper than 2.3 million, I think.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to watch. It will be an interesting thing too to watch Predators hockey Twitter and Facebook react to whatever happens with Luke Kunin, because there were big feelings about Luke Kunin this season. Big feelings.
He was bad. So
So when we come back, we're going to talk some more numbers with Bryan Bastin. He has all the numbers we need to know. But first, want to let you know that our partners at Bet Online continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports information. You can find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. Bet Online is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, Bryan, let's finish up here. Any other free agency thoughts that you want to share with us? David Riddick, obviously, I think we can agree that he's probably not going to be back.
100%.
I think we're going to see Connor Ingram, which I think everybody here in Nashville is on board with bringing up Connor Ingram. And I think there is, he has earned himself a lot of goodwill in the Predators community for sure during, with his performance a couple times in the season and during the playoffs. And I think, there will be some growing pains,
right,
as he does that. But do you expect to see more Ingram next season than we saw Riddick this past season? Where do you think that's going to fall?
I sure do hope so.
Yeah.
But I think we will see some of that too, because with Riddick, they had him as a veteran backup to be there in case of emergency. He was a break glass in case of emergency type of goaltender. When you got a guy like Connor Ingram, we saw the split for Saros and Rinne, slowly start to step up every single year, coming up to a couple years ago. And I think we'll see a little bit more than that, because there's no, whether or not his injury at the end of the season, Saros's injury was related to overwork or not. It was just, you can't put that much strain. And really, honestly, you can't put a goalie to face that many shots, in that type of a game, the physical type of game, and expect them to stay very good for the whole season. And so I think we see a whole lot more of Ingram, and I think it'll be a good thing. We'll get to see another, play a great goalie and develop another great goalie, because Ingram has to develop next year. He's got to showcase himself, because the Russian is in Milwaukee now and breathing down his neck. So we'll have to see.
Yes. I mean, people, I think, are about giddy that Askarov has made it into the United States and into Milwaukee. So it's going to be really interesting to keep our eye on Milwaukee as well next season. And this season, they're moving on. Let's talk about that for a second. Let's go Milwaukee.
Yes, they had a very exciting season. They played the Manitoba Moose, which is the Winnipeg Jets affiliate. They did win the first 2 games, actually, ironically, without Connor Ingram and Cody Glass, since they were with Nashville wasting their time. Sorry, but
you're not wrong.
Yeah, but so they won those 2 in Milwaukee, and then they went to Manitoba for the final 3 games. And Ingram in his first 2 starts gave up 7 goals and 5 goals in those 2. And, it showed a lot of confidence in Coach Carl Taylor to say, we want Ingram back out there. And he showed up big. I mean, they took an early lead. The Moose tied it in the second, but about 2 minutes later, the Milwaukee scored again. Tommy Novak, shout out there. I hope to see him in gold a little bit more. And of course, we had the first goal from Juuso Parssinen, which we love Juuso around here as well. It's been exciting to watch him. He is a dynamic puck handler. He's got the strength. He's got great vision and skating. He's going to be somebody, if you haven't been paying attention to Eric on the Future OTF on Twitter, he's been gushing about this kid, and for good reason. But it's been really great to watch. You see guys like Cody Glass, you see guys like Igor Afanasyev, Players like that, Tommy Novak, Cole Smith, guys that are really, we thought they're fourth line guys. We saw 7 minutes, 8 minutes of them in the NHL, and they've really carved out a great niche for themselves in Milwaukee. They go to Chicago against the Wolves, and the Wolves are absolutely loaded, and it's going to take Ingram's going to have to stand on his head to be able to steal that. But they won their first playoff series in 11 years. They were robbed. They were robbed last year, I believe, when they did not play. And then the year before, they had the best regular season record before the playoffs were canceled. And so, they really bounced back because they were kind of down and out for the first half of the season. So it's been really exciting to watch them, to cover them. It's been really exciting to actually do a little bit of journalism and digging to get some information. And making contacts there. I get to talk to really cool people up there. Aaron Sims, the announcer, one of the best announcers for minor league hockey I think I've ever heard.
Incredible.
I love him.
Yes, and hands down.
It's really great. Hopefully I'd like to get up there for a few games next season. And so, they look great, but it's been nice. It's been interesting to see how they develop because they're really, they're really preparing these guys to come up there. I mean, look at the seasons that Tomasino and Tolvanen and Tanner Jeannot and Alexander Carrier. I mean, if speaking of our sponsor with betting, who would you bet was the best performing rookie on the team this season in Nashville? In terms of like the advanced metrics, goals above replacement. Who would you bet the best rookie was this season?
Everybody would say Tanner Jeannot.
He was very good. He did finish.
He was very good. Yeah.
He was very good. He finished 18th for all rookies, which is great. But sitting at 7th and 8th was Filip Tomasino and Alexander Carrier. And I mean, Filip Tomasino, he was producing incredibly for his, for where he was playing up and down the lineup, on offense. He actually had a little bit better of an even strength defensive score than Alexander Carrier. But I mean, these guys were 7th and 8th. I mean, these are guys that are above Arthur Kaliev and Trevor Zegras, Lucas Raymond, and overall, I mean, they did something good. And I have to admit, I have been a doubter of Alexander Carrier since I started covering the Predators. I did not think his skills could translate to the NHL. I thought, Freddie Allard was going to be the future for Nashville, and obviously he's gone. But because again, I love guys named Freddie, and then they take them away from me. But I mean, Alexander Carrier had the, overall defensive, metric. Alex Carrier was the best, best rookie in defense, and Tomasino was second. And this is, that's forward.
Incredible.
But these are guys that are doing what they're supposed to do. And again, I'd like to also talk about, Eli Tolvanen. He was benched. He was taken out of games. He was done that. He had a tremendous season. He came into the league. Everybody said he's just a hard shot. That's all he is.
Yes.
And I think he's proven that he's not just a hard shot. Granted, that hard shot was missing a lot of the time this season, but he's been doing everything else so well. And, hopefully other teams, don't pay attention as much and, say, well, he didn't have that many goals. Nashville may try to move him since apparently he was a part of every proposed trade package for Nashville is to move him, which I don't think they should. No. But that's also another thing that it would be an option because again, maybe they waited a little bit too long on that. But I think they should definitely give him another chance because again, like John Hines says, if he's doing everything else on the ice right, the goals will come. Why he got benched towards the end of the season, I don't know. Still have no idea because Hines never gives you a straight answer on those things. But he did great, and so there's a lot to look forward to as far as these rookies, these young players. Again, Cody Glass could come in; he would be great. There's just Jeremy Davies, I think, can come up, and Jeremy Davies in the third pair, I think, would be a good move. And so, there's a lot to look forward to. They just have to handle this right because they've got forwards, they've got defensemen that are developing well, and Nashville's not known for developing forwards. I mean, they just aren't. All these players on the team, all the forwards that broke these records, they weren't Nashville draft picks. Yeah. And so you got to hold on to the ones they're doing a good job with. Or Carl Taylor's doing a good job with them in Milwaukee or wherever junior leagues that these guys are playing. And they got to stick with these guys. They can't give up on them this easy.
Well, and Eeli Tolvanen is one that I really would like to see the Predators hang on to. And I also won't be terribly surprised if they don't. And what frustrates me is I can see Eeli Tolvanen very much turning into a tale similar to Kevin Fiala, where he's going to land somewhere and blossom. And I think the Predators are going to, if they get rid of him, they've given up on him too soon. He does so many other things right. And you can't just look at goals as your stat for how did Eeli Tolvanen do. You just
preaching to the
can't do
choir,
that.
and you're preaching to the choir. But I mean, but the funny thing is yeah, like this is me. You know, I've the numbers support the fact that he's doing everything else on the ice extremely well. I mean, he's a good defensive forward. He's a great he's
Yes.
fantastic on the forecheck. You saw him throwing hits all the time this season. But you would think, you know, this is exactly where you would see a coach being like, he's doing great. He's doing everything he's supposed to. Don't worry about the goals. But then we saw him benched, and we saw him not playing and stuff. And so it's kind of like, all right, I don't think he's in the same spot because Kevin Fiala, I think he did all the developing he could do in Nashville. You know, I think I've said many times, I love the way he plays. He's a technical. I mean, there's very few players that are as technically sound as him, but he has that tendency to want to play like Filip Forsberg a lot. He wanted, there was nobody better in the NHL besides maybe Roman Josi and a couple other guys better at getting the puck, carrying the puck into the defensive zone. But he's not Filip Forsberg because Forsberg's got that combination of technique and power. And so he tried to power through a guy that just get him to the boards and it'd be a turnover every time. And that, it's just, and he was under Laviolette, so he wasn't going to get any better. And I think it's good. Tolvanen still got room to grow. That shot's going to come back. Like it's not, he doesn't just lose that, Again, if you use him like Ovechkin and just let him shoot on the power play, let him play his game at 5-on-5, but let him be that point guy or that guy who takes those shots. If they could finally start moving on the power play instead of standing there, completely still, he'd be really dangerous. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they moved on from him, but I'd be really, really upset about it.
Yeah, that would be a real disappointing move. And I agree with you. It's sort of vague where the disconnect with him is, because it feels like he is somebody who does fit into the system. The things that he is doing well that may not show up on the main stats page are things that work well in the system that John Hines wants. And so there is a little bit of a disconnect trying to piece together what happened with Eeli Tolvanen this season. And I really hope we have a chance to see him next season here in Nashville, because I think this is a young player who has a ton of potential. And once that shot comes back and clicks, he is going to be a 200-foot threat on the ice for the Predators, or whoever, heaven help us.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, maybe I understand why the coaches benched him, because he had a -7 plus-minus this season. So we know that's the best stat. We know that's the best stat out there.
Oh my gosh. Plus-minus, the hoax of plus-minus. It's like you want me to cry.
Yeah, it's something, right? I mean, hey, Dante Fabro +13. That means he's good. Michael McCarron +10. That means he's got to be a great forward, right?
Right.
Because he happened to be on the ice when things happened.
Oh my gosh, plus-minus. Literally, it still enrages me. It's still, every time I hear somebody use that as like justification for something, I'm like, that's not even real.
And I really apologize for putting that, instilling that in you, that it's that bad. I put that in you, and I apologize, but it is a really crappy stat.
It shook me to my core. I'm not going to lie, Brian. It shook me to my core. All right, Brian, thank you for joining us. Before we go, I want you to tell everybody, where can they find you and your work online?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Of course, you can find me and Ann and Nick and, of course, everybody else at ontheforecheck.com. You can see me at games, once we have games again, at Bridgestone Arena, as Sean Smith and I cover those games live as credentialed journalists, which I think is still very, very cool. And, of course, you can see me with the Renegades of Puck. We've been doing videos after every single game this season, and now we're doing it with the Milwaukee Admirals. So you can that, and then, of course, you can find me on Twitter at Bryan Bastin, BRYAN BASTIN, to hear whatever it is, whatever inane topics I'm talking about, but usually hockey. And that's and if you see me out in the world or you see me at a game next season, please stop by. Some of the coolest games experiences I've had this season were people stopping by to say hi, meeting some people. So please do. It's one of my favorite things in the world.
Once again, I want to thank Brian for joining us here at Locked On Predators. If you aren't following Brian at ontheforecheck.com or on Twitter, make sure you give him a follow. And if you have a stats question about the Predators season, or maybe some free agency questions, be sure to give him a shout out on Twitter and he'll get back with you. Coming up tomorrow on Locked On Predators, we're going to take a closer look at those NHL end-of-season awards. The Predators have several nominees in a couple of different categories. We're going to talk to some people about the competition and how likely are the Predators to bring home some hardware to Bridgestone Arena. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.